It's time for another riveting edition of your favorite Sunday morning program. That's Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali. Here's what's making headlines at 900 hours. Leaders of China and African states have agreed to accelerate the pace of trade and investment cooperation in the next 3 years. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has lashed out at EFF leader Julius Malema for his recent criticism of former President Nelson Mandela. Ramaphosa was speaking at the 30th anniversary of Congress of South African Trade Unions in Durban, saying Mandela spent 27 painful years in prison to lead the country. Well, Kim Kardashian and rapper husband Kanye West have welcomed their baby boy. The reality star gave birth to their second child yesterday morning. The baby's name has not yet been revealed, though. All right, let's now have a look at some of the front pages of our Sunday newspapers. There's the Sunday Times, and it's leading with the headline about Communications Minister Faith Mutambi's bid to put the public broadcaster under state control. The Sunday Independent is leading with a story about democratic alliances infighting among its top brass, Western Cape Premier Helen Zille and former MEC Lynette Max. There's the City Press, and it's leading with a story about Pierre's supporters apparently in the firing line as the new police head sweeps through the ranks, picking out those who were close to her. The Weekend August is leading with the same headline as the Sunday Independent about the very ugly public spat between the DA's Western Province Premier Helen Zille and former MEC Lynette Max. And that's the Sunday Tribune, leading with a story of the NPA working around the clock to get Oscar Pistorius back in court. Well, joining us today for the first half of the show on the topic of honoring the life of late struggle icon Nelson Mandela. Let's welcome Mr. Sello Hatang. He is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So what an honor to have you with us here on Media Monitor. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much,
All right.
for me to be here.
Thank you so much, Sello. Well, before we delve into that discussion, as Media Monitor and alongside the entire nation, we are celebrating the life and times of the late struggle icon Nelson Mandela. Now, the celebrations come ahead of Madiba's death at the age of 95 on December the 5th on 2013. We pay tribute to this world icon and the founding father of our democracy for his contribution to the liberation of this country and the legacy he has left behind. Let's take you back to some of the events and people that were touched by this giant, especially his love for the children. Here's the insert.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Very good. Very good. Oh, very nice. What's your name?
My name is Anil.
Oh, that's a nice name, man. Who gave you this nice name?
My mother.
Your mother? Oh, very good. There is this craze for education, which is understandable, because people today cannot serve the community without education. And the parents, some of whom have never gone to school, realize how important education is.
From the countryside, I did not know what matriculation was, but I could see from the way this man was walking that indeed this man had a matriculation.
Hello, how are you?
Okay.
What's your name?
Sabia is my
Oh, and how old are you?
5 years.
5 years. Oh, this is good. When you are big, what are you going to be?
A baker.
Eh?
What you going to be? Tell me,
Are you going to be a teacher? Oh, good. Will you tell the other children that I love them?
Yes.
You will, eh?
We will. Yes.
Oh, very good.
Wow, Sello, to watch, visuals of Utata like that at such a time when we have to remember, the sad time that he passed away. What goes through your mind as the foundation?
I think for us, it's there's a part of one that's missing Madiba a lot. The part that is reminiscing about the past that you've just shown now, of a Madiba who was very active and of a Madiba who always wanted to just serve. He wanted to always look after those who were most vulnerable in our society. And that's the thing that always bothers us when we don't see people who are trying to serve and try to help those who are vulnerable. And that's the thing that always sits with one, that we need to try and serve as much as possible. And watching Madiba now, all smiles and a happy Madiba, it reminds me of a day that he came to the foundation. I think it could have even been the last time he came to the foundation, 18th of November 2010. He was hosting the Bafana Bafana and the US team. And the child walked through the door, and Madiba was not happy that the child was there in the first place because it was during school hours. So he asked, why are you here? Shouldn't you be in school? That's why education is so important. Whenever we try and talk about Madiba's legacy, we try and emphasize that the poor quality of education is a sad indictment on Madiba's legacy. I think we need to be working hard to improve on the quality of education. But then after he finished this part about the child not having been in school and being reassured that the child asked for permission and that it would go back to school, he then turned to the audience and said, these guys, I hear that you are the captain. They've been so misbehaving here. I think you need to be calling them to order. And that's a Madiba who was humorous, who could just make you feel like you were Madiba in his presence. Whenever he came to the office, one felt like you could be a Madiba yourself.
Very wonderful indeed. Now, Sello, do tell us about the foundation's ongoing honoring of Tata's legacy. Many people don't know what you do as a foundation.
When we established in 1999, we established just after Madiba had retired. You know that he retired 3 or 4 times. He tried to retire many times, and he announced at the foundation in 2004 that he was retiring from retirement, and this after many attempts. But in 1999, when he established us, he wanted us to do peace-building work, democracy, and human rights. And in line with that, we then do 3 things. We do Mandela Day work, which is no longer just confined to 67 minutes and no longer just confined to the 18th of July. We've changed the motto now to being making every day a Mandela Day. So it's take action, inspire change, make every day a Mandela Day. That's why on Friday, to mark the second anniversary of Madiba's passing, the staff of the Nelson Mandela Foundation spent the day in Duduza with children living with disabilities. You'd remember that on Thursday we were marking the International Day for People Living with Disabilities. And the theme for the day, the UN declared that it should be about inclusiveness.
Absolutely, yes.
And we were doing that kind of work for Mandela Day. And we encourage in South Africans that do something. Don't just observe Madiba through events. Do something to change lives.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's at the heart of Mandela Day. The second part of the work is memory work. We are the only institution that has Madiba's papers, and I've invited you to come and visit the foundation during the course of next week.
Definitely coming.
Because we've got Madiba's letters he wrote while he was in prison, notes about what he thought should change in our country. You think about HIV/AIDS, which was marked at the beginning of this week. He wrote about it, what he thought should change about attitude towards people living with HIV/AIDS, etc. And those are what makes this center very special. The third element is dialogue work. We convene dialogue on difficult social issues. And at the heart of it is social justice, because we believe that until such time that we deal with issues of poverty and inequality, we will continue to have people question Madiba's legacy a lot. And we'd have people saying, but what did he do to bring about change? Beyond just him being known as a nice man, as a nice grandfather, what is it that he did? And that's why we're convening these dialogues on social critical issues. And we're saying, let's try and make the change ourselves. We cannot be hurling insults whenever we differ. We need to be finding a way to sit around the table and say, what is it that we can do differently?
So look, very interesting. We'll touch into the questioning of the legacy. But I mean, you were visited by Prince Harry this year. Do tell us what emanated from that particular visit.
You know, thanks for raising that. I know that if you had a way, you would have had him sitting here,
yes.
not me. You're not supposed to say yes. I mean,
I'm
you're
sorry,
hitting
Sello.
hard on my
Who
ego
wouldn't
now.
want to?
Well, Prince Harry was at the foundation, and his visit was sort of a kickoff of the Memorial Week. He came in order to come and pass on his message from the Queen Elizabeth, because he was here in order to represent her, in other words, officially. So he came to see Mrs. Graça Machel, and then came and gave a speech at the foundation. I think at the heart of his speech was about ensuring that we recognize that Madiba does not just belong to South Africa. You'd remember that his final attempt at retirement, he actually announced his final retirement in London, where he said that it's in your hands now to help build a different world, a world that cares about others. So he did that in the UK. So the Prince was here to say, we are with you. We are in solidarity with you, people of South Africa. Let's build South Africa together. Let's build a world that cares, because the world is in conflict at the moment. And he was here to mark the beginning of the week, the Memorial Week.
All right, we're going to continue with that after this short break. We're going to take a quick ad break. Do stay with us.
Although I've been to South Africa many times, this is my first official tour on behalf of the Queen. I've been keen to see how Mr. Mandela's values and his legacy are inspiring the next generation and shaping the future for South Africa. I've visited a number of fantastic organisations over the last 4 days, supporting some of the most disadvantaged young people across the country. These organisations, although very different, are united in ambition to unlock the huge talent amongst youth in South Africa, regardless of background or circumstances, and crucially on World AIDS Day, the status of their health. These organisations, which include the Nelson Mandela Foundation, are empowering the next generation of engaged South African citizens. This innovative centre for memory opens up history to help guide the future. I am sure Madiba would be pleased to see such great work being carried in his name, giving inspiration to so many.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, I'm with the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Mr. Sello Hatang, as we celebrate the legacy of the late great legend, Datu Nelson Mandela. You can also share your views on this discussion on our social media page at SA Media Monitor. Now, although celebrated around the world for his life and legacy, Nelson Mandela was also a family man. Let's take a look at what some of his children and grandchildren had to say about him before we continue with our discussion.
I grew up very angry, very bitter at my dad because I felt he chose other things rather than us. Every child wants to grow up with both parents. You know, you've seen children who are war babies who travel to countries to find who they are because they want to find their dads, because they want to find out who they are, what makes them up, what's their DNA, what geographical location and environment influences them. And I think it was the same for me until I was in my mid-30s and I said, you know, this little voice says, stop. You are destroying your own self. You've created your own prison. And so I had to free myself out of this prison.
We've had our moments. I mean, at the lying in state, I just couldn't. That's when I really truly broke down, and I hadn't broken down since it had happened.
People think that my grandfather is Mandela. He's not Mandela. He's born off Mandela. We come from that lineage. King Ngubengcuka had 5 sons, and one of those sons, his name was Mandela. We carry the name of that ancestor.
We're not suddenly going to be different people because Tatomkhulu has passed on. He's given us the lessons to carry us through for the rest of our lives.
The best way to honor him is continue the legacy which he has started of humility, compassion, and actually commemorating your fellow man and giveth of your heart with all one's soul.
That's very interesting views there, Sello. But I have to ask you this. This was in the news. There was recent comments about Utata being a sellout. Mam Gracia Machel also spoke out against it on Thursday during Prince Harry's visit. As a foundation, what is your reaction to such comments?
Well, on Thursday also, the chairman of our board, Professor Njabulon Ndebele, also hinted at this issue. And he indicated that one of the things that we're making a mistake about when we talk about Madiba's legacy is expecting that this legacy is pristine. You know, that you receive a legacy and you must then live it. Instead of receiving a legacy and then you make of it what you believe should be the right thing. And in the case of the criticism that has been leveled at Madiba's legacy, we must remember that Madiba had a key project in mind, which was nation building. He did his part to bring democracy to South Africa with people like Ahmed Kathrada, Andrew Mlangeni, George Bizos. It was a collective effort of people who really tried to then bring about democracy in our country. They did that part. But then Madiba then said, it's in your hands to make of this democracy what you think it should be. And whether you use the word like sell out or not, it's neither here nor there. Because the reality of the matter is, if you didn't do your part, if you are not playing your part today to help build the South Africa that you dream of, you cannot be blaming those who have already played their part. You need to be thinking to yourself, what am I doing to help build that country? Because Madiba says that one of the questions that should bother us every day when we wake up is, what am I doing to help build a country of my dreams? Because it's my country. It cannot be fair that you look back at 20 years and you're still saying, had they done what my parents should have done is this. It's not going to help much. But it's to say, what am I doing to help reimagine South Africa? That's why the Fees Must Fall movement gave us a new energy as a country, to say we made promises at the beginning of our democracy, 1994. Now the young people are making us account. But as they do so, they should also be careful not to then be resorting to violence. The replacement of, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago where I was called a liberal, for example, because I was saying one needs not resort to violence for one to then be called a revolutionary. You need not replace what was core to our values, dialogue. Madiba established that together with others, The dialogue centers us. Now, if you don't want to be in dialogue, you then resort to violence. And that's when you are revolutionary. That can't be right.
It can't be right. But this sounds like, you know, a lot of people then are not informed about Utata's legacy. Is there anything the foundation is doing to try and educate specifically the youth, Sello? Because, I mean, it should start there. That's what we should be focusing on in terms of building the future.
You know, one of the things that we're going to be doing more of, it's these dialogues with young people. We started with one with the president of SRC together with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. We'll be doing more of them. In fact, on the 15th of this month, the day that Madiba was buried, we're going to be hosting a dialogue with 3 young people, one an entrepreneur, one a business person, and then also the student leader of the Fees Must Fall movement, and someone who represents the arts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And with the 3 of them, they might end up being 4. It's 4 young women that we're saying all our future depends on them. And next year we'll then roll out more of these dialogues in communities that are far-flung. We're not only going to focus on Gauteng and making it about Johannesburg. We'll be going to rural areas in the place of my birth in Kuma. Okay. We will be there in Northwest. We're going to the Eastern Cape to then go and say, what do we need to do differently? How do we include young people more?
Speaking of including young people more, Sello, what kind of projects is the foundation working on, or the ongoing projects that the foundation is busy with in terms of empowering youth in this country? Because we know that Utata loved children, and you spoke earlier about education. Is there something that the foundation is doing to try and bolster the education sector?
At the beginning of this week, we launched the Kilimanjaro Challenge 2016. With this challenge, it's and I'd like to challenge you publicly that you should also join us, climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
All right.
So we have, next year we're going to have 67 people climb Kilimanjaro. And with this climb, we are ensuring that young people can, girls, it's focused on girls, that girl children can stay in school. This year, our target was 270,000 girls. Wow. We managed to raise enough funds to help keep 272,000 girls in school. Wow. So next year, we're going to make it 350,000. By 2020, we want to have reached 2 million girls, young girls, that they should not be out of school because of lack of sanitary towels, for example. So that's something that we're doing. And then we also have dialogues that will be ongoing, as I said, on the 15th. In fact, on the 12th, we'd like to urge the viewers out there that they should join us in Pretoria. We'll be having the walk from Freedom Park to the union buildings. All right. And all of us are saying, let's try help build this nation.
All right, so let's quickly take a look at what the people at home are saying about this topic on Utata. All right, Tulani Nkosi says education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world in our Mandela. Thank you, Tulani. Unique SA Problem says, why do people continually talk about defending, struggle, liberation, freedom, instead of hard work and thanks? Very good question there, SA Problems. Raymond Alexandra says, never, never, and never again will one race be dominant over another. Free schooling, free healthcare, varsities, and all right, I can't see the rest of that tweet there. Allow burning. All right, thank you so much. There, Kolani Mvulana says, I knew that if I didn't let go of my bitterness before I walked through those prison gates, I'd still be in prison. And he's quoting Utata there. Sello, your closing words. How do people quickly come and see you at the foundation?
I'd like to encourage you to use the hashtag Madiba Remembered for this days until the 15th. But to come to the foundation, you can visit us at the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory, and you can then have a view of Madiba's papers. On the 15th, as I said, we would have the dialogue. You can actually, it will be screened most probably live on SABC. And we would also have streaming, live streaming as well. So please do follow us on Facebook at Nelson Mandela and on Twitter as well.
Look, Sello, what should one expect when coming to the foundation? I mean, youth of today, born frees. Tell us about how else you're reaching out to them.
Well,
Do you
social
encourage
media
them to come through to,
yeah,
to the
social media
foundation?
platforms are a big thing, but also we have apps that we have launched recently.
Oh yes,
You know,
the Mandela
like on
app.
the codes,
yes.
yeah, on the codes, and the one on Madiba's footsteps.
Yes.
With SA Tourism. So that's something that you can do
It's
through
youth-friendly as well.
which is youth friendly. We're now exploring ways of taking things like the cartoon book that we have, putting it online, that you can then be able to have such content easily accessible on social media platforms. So all those are available to young people, and you need to just go to our website, nelsonmandela.org, and you can then learn more. That comment about work is important. All of us must emphasize more work and service, that we need to be serving more. And our gratitude needs to be at the center of it.
Thank you.
Because those who served, George Bezos last night, I mean, he's 84, 85 now. This is a man who gave everything up for us to have what we have. Gratitude can help.
Look, Sello, how does one make arrangements to come to the foundation? Do I have to email? Do I have to call?
You can email.
How do
you
I
can
do it?
email the email address is nmf@nelsonmandela.org. nmf@nelsonmandela.org, or call 011-547-5600.
547?
5600.
5600, all right. And of course, you're going to be open throughout this festive season.
We are open until the 18th.
Until the 18th.
The 18th of December.
Sello, thank you so much. I'm going to take you up on the Kilimanjaro challenge. I'm going to be one of the 67 people that are going to be climbing for a great course like for Mandela. Thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck with your great works there. That was Mr. Sello Hatang. He is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, commemorating the life and time of Nelson Mandela. Stay tuned for more Media Monitor after this short break.
Up to 2,300 young girls, as Mr. Michel Sidibe said, are becoming infected per week. And this affects young girls of ages 15 and 24. We cannot carry on like this. This has to come to an end. We've got to bring this figure down, and it must start with the adults. The sugar daddies must stop molesting our children. We therefore mount a highly visible national campaign to decrease new HIV infections, particularly in this group.
Welcome back. Now, my guest for the rest of this hour is Mr. Michael Motsoeneng, who is an attorney from Motsoeneng Bill Attorneys, to try and give us legal expertise on the discussion on Oscar Pistorius being found guilty of murder by the Supreme Court of Appeal. So, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Before we continue with our discussion, Michael, with Oscar Pistorius' conviction overturned by the Supreme Court of Appeals from homicide, culpable homicide to murder, Pistorius has now been branded a murderer, a label he escaped when he was initially convicted last November. The upgrading of his conviction leaves Judge Thokozile Masipa with the task now of resentencing the shamed athlete. Let's take a look at this insert.
In these circumstances, I have no doubt that in firing the fatal shots, the accused must have foreseen, and therefore did foresee, that whoever was behind the toilet door might die, but reconciled himself to that event occurring and gambled with that person's life. This constituted dolus eventualis on his part. As a result of the errors of law referred to, and on a proper appraisal of the facts, he ought to have been convicted not of culpable homicide on that count, but of murder.
Michael, I think we all became legal experts around the issue of dolus eventualis, but now, is this finally the correct interpretation of what dolus eventualis is?
Yeah, well, you know, it's finally the correct interpretation, because once the Supreme Court of Appeal says it, which is a very senior or high court, because you'll remember that when you take our courts, we've got the Magistrates Court, which is the beginning, and then you go to the High Court, which is where Oscar Pistorius was, and this is the Supreme Court of Appeal, right? So that carries with it a lot of weight. But I would say it's a correct interpretation, because this is what all of us understood dolus eventualis to be. So in other words, the Supreme Court of Appeal has not said to us anything new. They've just said to us what we've always understood. The judgment by Justice Masipa obviously created confusion on our part, because when we, as lawyers and as commentators, looked at the evidence, we were persuaded that dolus eventualis had been established, and for that reason, that it came as a personal surprise to me when he was convicted of culpable homicide. So it is nothing new that the Supreme Court of Appeal has said. It is just an affirmation of what we've always understood to be dolus eventualis.
Look, Michael, is it correct to say, based on the fact that Masipa apparently ignored very important circumstantial evidence, that is why the ruling had to be reverted?
Yeah, the circumstantial evidence was important insofar as it indicates the intention of the
Absolutely,
party.
yes.
So when we're talking about foreseeability, because you remember when we're talking about dolus eventualis, there's an element where we say the person must have foreseen that the outcome, and then they go further and say, then you decide to gamble. So when you're talking about foreseeability, you then go to the circumstance or the circumstantial evidence, and the circumstantial evidence tells you that Oscar Pistorius approached a closed toilet cubicle, a closed one. So that's one thing, right? It's not locked, so the danger is not imminent. The second thing is he fired 4 shots into that closed cubicle. And the bullets are special bullets, which, as you know, once they enter the flesh of the individual, they cause greater harm than a normal bullet. The other thing that the court, as you would have noticed, took very seriously is the fact that the cubicle offered no place to escape. In other words, it is unlikely that somebody would have escaped 4 shots, given the size of the cubicle. So those circumstances applied to the test of dolus eventualis would establish murder.
Oh, thank you for that lesson. Michael, look, now, in all fairness, as an attorney, is it really easily possible for any judge, not necessarily Masipa, to have ruled as Masipa did on such a high-profile case?
Yeah, I think the fact that it was high-profile is in itself
Came
a
with
lot
of pressure.
And for everybody, you know, I think the lawyers involved ought to be commended. Judge Masipa herself, you know, she received a lot of praise from the Supreme Court of Appeal. But that's not something that should faze you as a lawyer, you know, because pressure happens in, you know, different cases all come with pressure. It's just at different scales. But you know, I don't think that, I think Judge Masipa acted extremely professional, even though we may not have agreed with her judgment in the end. But the manner in which she conducted the proceedings, the manner in which she allowed the parties to ventilate their issues, that it was a remarkable thing to watch. And as you said in your preamble to the show, everybody now knows what dolus eventualis is.
But Michael, a lot of people are saying that Masipa ruled the way that she did because Gerinel failed to prove with evidence to the state that, it was guilty beyond reasonable doubt murder.
Yeah, well, Gerrie Nel, you'll remember, initially pursued murder premeditated,
yes,
which is more serious
yes.
than just plain murder. Naturally, when a judge, and that's why we have all of these safeguards. So the first is you approach the court of first instance, and in this case it was the High Court. The Supreme Court of Appeal is there as a safeguard of justice. And it is not unique for a judge to err, as did Judge Masipa err in this matter. What does then happen is that there's a safeguard which you find in the Supreme Court of Appeal that provides that extra assurance to people who are subject to the justice system, and that would probably make all of us, because even though you're not personally involved in the matter, you are affected by it. But even the Supreme Court of Appeal itself is not the final court. You still got to go to the Constitutional Court. And the thing that you find a lot of criticism that may have gone to Judge Masipa is the same criticism that the Supreme Court of Appeal itself faces in different circumstances, because there are a myriad of cases where the Constitutional Court has overturned even the Supreme Court of Appeal's judgment.
Very interesting indeed. So it's going to be an ongoing legal battle. But Michael, you know what, speaking of criticism, this brings back the question of people are doubting our judiciary. It seems like we're fumbling. We still have unresolved cases. And then when we have cases that we take to court, they're still not tight.
I would say people should have the opposite conclusion, because what this has demonstrated is the fact that our judicial system is world class. In fact, I would dare to say that we would be ranked amongst the top 10. It's the most beautiful system that I have ever experienced.
But then who's not executing their duties here, Michael, if there's so much cloudy doubt around everything?
Alicia, then you've got to be specific about what you're critiquing. Because if you look at this case, it was an exemplary, anywhere in the world, anybody watching this matter, anybody in the world can have nothing but envy for our country. So if you have other criticisms about how long matters take, of course, that's criticism that we are alive to and we know. And of course, matters do take exceptionally long, and you find that high-profile matters are expedited more than less high-profile matters. That's a criticism I would take. But the way the justice has played itself out in this matter, it is second to none.
Look, Michael, let's go back to the beginning here. How did you react? I mean, I'm sure you've always had your opinions all along when the case started. How did you react from the initial judgment to the Supreme Court?
Well, I was obviously surprised because, me being surprised...
Did you expect it?
Not in this fashion, no. I expected that Dulles, it's funny, I would speak now to you as if, I have the benefit of hindsight, but if you go to the record, you'll find that I said the following. I said, premeditated murder was not established. Dolus eventualis was established. I didn't see anything that would establish any form of culpable homicide, because when you're talking about culpable homicide, you're talking about negligence. And I would submit that somebody who fires 4 shots at a closed cubicle the question of negligence cannot even arise, because quite clearly that's not a negligent act. Because the other thing that Judge Masipa mistaken is, it doesn't matter if it was Riva behind that door or Robin Hood. It doesn't matter. Even if it was a thief who was behind that door, it would have still been Dolus eventualis, because there was no imminent danger to Oscar Pistorius at the time of firing the shot. So culpable homicide was, for me, the most remote conclusion I would have thought of, given the circumstances of this matter.
We're going to leave it there for now, Michael. Take a quick ad break. We'll be back for more Oscar right here on Media Monitor. Do stay with us.
Transformation is a dynamic thing, first of all. But I personally believe that whoever wants to coach, whoever wants to apply for the job, needs to know that transformation is going to be on top of his agenda, or else he shouldn't apply. I think we as an organization are just going to have to be much, much harder than we've ever been. We don't have another opportunity. We've signed an agreement with the sports governing body in the country and the ministry, and we believe in it. And so, as a sport, we need to go forward with that in mind. And so I say, with all due respect, if anybody wants to be the coach of South Africa in 2016, then he needs to understand, or she needs to understand that it's gonna involve transformation.
You're watching Media Monitor. Welcome back. You can still share your views on our discussions on Twitter. We're now joined by Mr. Levi Kwabato, program specialist from MISA SA. And of course, I'm still with Mr. Michael Mutsuning, who is an attorney. Levi, welcome to the show, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Look, I suppose I want to hear your reaction. What was your reaction when you heard about, the murder conviction?
All right, thanks, Alicia. Just to correct that, not Mr., just media analyst.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll kill the producers, it's fine. Go ahead.
Well, my reaction was sort of, there's justice done. I think from the get-go, it had been quite apparent, and just leading on to what Michael had said earlier, that culpable homicide seemed a bit unjust and seemed a bit unfair on River, especially if you look at the circumstances leading to the entire debacle. So for me, it was really, I think there's justice done, but also there was also justice done for the intruder who we never got to know about, but the invisible man in Oscar's bathroom. Also, I think there was also justice for me. So my reaction was also to say, well, this man who existed in Oscar's imagination has also been acquitted of his crime, as it were, of being in Oscar's house. So there was justice for River and also justice for this invisible man.
Look, Levi, you've missed out on all the legal aspects and terms, but we're going to continue with the discussion because I wanted to bring Michael into this. Michael, you spoke earlier on about the pressures that are on the justice system or the judiciary or those people trying to push out the law. The issue of broadcasting such high-profile cases on television, the issue of constant judgment on social media, what do you make of that?
I think it's the greatest thing that has ever happened to us as a South African legal system is the televising of the Oscar Pistorius trial. We always say that justice must be seen to be done.
Absolutely.
That's an important element of it. So when we're talking about that and we keep things private and we keep the public unexposed to it, it's not a good thing. When you go and you are anywhere, any corner of South Africa, and you're talking to any person, and they understand dolus eventualis, they understand the bail system, and people get bail and people don't get bail. They understand a trial, they understand that they have right to legal representation, and they understand that their lawyers can fight it out. They understand that they can speak, they can represent themselves. That's a positive thing.
Absolutely.
And once people know this, then it's a good thing. Then it means you have good participants in the legal system, even for witnesses. Can you imagine how many cases get struck off the roll because there aren't any witnesses? Now, the would-be witness, the witness of tomorrow, has seen how this has played out. Of course, there was immense pressure, but they have seen how the input or the contribution from witnesses is so paramount to a case. They have seen how when police officers do a good job in like Mangena, what happens? And that was a good illustration of another participant in the justice system, which is the police. You've got to be impressed. So it is fantastic. It is the greatest pressure that the legal system can ever ask for.
What do you think, Levi?
The pressure is quite huge, and Michael is quite right on the issue of access to justice, for instance, which is becoming quite a prominent issue globally, as it were, especially even in the Sustainable Development Goals. You get it. So I think having the media there really helped in us understanding common man on the ground or the ordinary man on the street in understanding how the criminal justice system actually works. And also that element of justice being seen to be done was quite apparent. So I think kudos to the media. There is lots of criticism that you can level at the media, at social media, for instance. But I think the fact that we got talking, and not just at a national level, but also at a very global level, I think that was quite important. And there is, I think, a deeper understanding of how justice works, but also quite more fundamentally, that people can actually think that there is this relationship between them and the courts or law enforcement agencies within their countries is also quite a huge factor. So I think, you know, the media have been quite good in this area, although you can level multiple number of criticisms.
I want to ask, gentlemen, I mean, especially you, Levi, as media, what should we be focusing on and scrutinizing about the latest developments on this case?
Well, I think there is something to consider about how we report on celebrities or on prominent people and how we report on the unknowns, for instance. So Oscar would dominate the front pages because he is Oscar. Then there are millions of other people who every day go through the justice system and are left unexposed. And there could be challenges, as Michael is alluding to, that are happening. And these are also left unexposed because media don't have sufficient resources to deploy to the courts every day. Occasionally what you get is, you know, either a sound bite or that, you know, a few column inches in the newspaper right at the bottom of page 42. So I think there's something to consider in that regard, that can we devote more resources to reporting about crime, about reporting the court processes within South Africa.
And speaking of devotion, can we please be devoted to reporting the right facts? I mean, there was that whole debacle about a wrong report about a warrant having been issued. Michael?
I just wanted to add a point where when we talk about justice being seen to be done, it's not a foreign thing. In fact, in Africa and African jurisprudence, when there's a case, it gets adjudicated in a lekgotla, and there's a chief. And people gather around, and everybody can look into what is happening. So it's not a foreign thing. It's something that we have we've had, and we still have, because these courts still exist even to this day. So I just wanted to add that
these days, Michael. All right, Michael. Legally now, what's the due process? And take us through step by step.
Well, what would have to happen now is that the Supreme Court of Appeal has directed that the matter go back to the High Court and to the trial court for sentencing. So all that would happen is that the matter appears before the trial court again, and then sentencing proceedings happen where both parties must now lead evidence in mitigation and evidence in aggravation. That's on the part of the state.
As to why he should
get a lesser one, because you've got to remember that sentence for murder is prescribed at 15 years. All right, that's a prescribed amount of time that one serves. What then the state would have to do is then to lead aggravating evidence to say why he must get either 15 years or more.
Okay.
And then the defense, on the other hand, would argue why he must get less than the prescribed minimum sentence.
And this is all based on the current evidence that's been presented to the court already, no new evidence?
The evidence, so you don't go back into the crime itself, but you go into the personal circumstances of the individual. You talk about, so if I'm the defense, I would focus very heavily on what has become to his career, what has become to his persona. You know, besides his career, he's now become, you know, a superstar for the wrong reasons. So to speak. So that's something that will be taken into account.
Wow. All right. So around what time should we expect, like, the final? How long can this process basically take, Michael?
I've seen that the National Prosecuting Authorities are moving very quickly on this. So I would say by February we should have something.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for that outlook here. We were talking about Oscar, but now let's quickly see some of the tweets that you have for us on this topic. Sabet Jazabay says he's spoiling for a stay out of jail plea. All right, he's spoiling for a stay out of jail plea. Thank you so much, Sabo, whatever that means. Portia says means SA has an advanced legal system, as Michael said, which can rectify its own mistakes and allows all parties to exercise all remedies. Frank Dube says it's the judges who must go to jail. Oscar has been reaped. Dudu Zimbasa says we have appeals so mistakes can be corrected. Appeals happen every day. This is not the first decision to get overturned. Yes, true. No apologies, says Jub Jub got 25. They better be consistent. All right. We're not going to raise that issue here. Last but not least, Jacob says our judgment is busy going down. Big problems still to come if it carries on like now. Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, I would have loved to hear your comments on those tweets, but thank you for joining us regardless. Let me thank our guests once again for partaking in our discussion this morning. That was another exciting and informative edition of your favorite program, Media Monitor. We were broadcasting to you live from our SABC studios here in Auckland Park. Join us again next week, Sunday, for another jam-packed edition. If you want a repeat of the show, do find us on YouTube. You can also find us on Facebook as well as on Twitter. I'm Alicia Jali. This is SABC News. Do enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.